Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another very special episode of Ignite Radio Live over the 5 mighty stations of Annunciation Radio. Nearly 2,000 years ago, St. Paul shared a frustration that echoes throughout the ages. In his letter to the Romans, he proclaims, "I do what I don't want to do." Those words are an honest expression from the heart of an honest Christian. If they weren't, we'd all be saints. We'd be perfect. We've heard the truth, we know the truth, we've made some progress in the truth, but it's worth asking, are we all about it? Is it our driving mission and purpose? Or have we come to a plateau? Have we become contented? In our own estimation, have we become good enough? Well, as St. Augustine famously noted, our souls will not rest until they rest in God, until we're completely surrendered to Him. If our God is a God of rest, it begs the question, why do we settle for unrest? If we're not about God claiming ever greater territory, the reality is territory is being taken. Recently, at a monthly battle-ready evening for men, we took up these questions. JonMarc Grodi drew upon the great wisdom of Joseph Pieper's work on the cardinal virtues. He offered great insight into how we might more fully make progress in what we profess, how we might become who we're made to be, the best version of ourselves. Because JonMarc's presentation runs short of a full hour, tonight we're going to intermix it with select pieces from Handel's oratorio, Esther. Why this masterpiece, Esther? Because it's the true story of an unlikely Jewish queen who does not cower to fear. She exhibits extraordinary virtue that echoes throughout the ages. Virtue made available to us today for such a time as this. Battle Ready is a monthly gathering of men associated with the movement Pentecost 365. We're a movement of men seeking to be ignited in everyday faith with our wives. Grace is being outpoured. Receive it. Find out more now at pentecost365.us. And now, on with the presentation.
One of the things that started a train of thought a couple of years ago was just coming back to this great group, really enjoying it and really benefiting from it, but realizing we're coming back over and over to the same things. Like we're learning, we have a lot of head knowledge, but boy, like it's like nothing changes day to day, week to week. It's like I'm still fighting the same old battles. I still, have you got around to praying with your wife yet? No, well, me neither. Dang it, we keep talking about that. It's been 4 years now. I mean, gosh. And so, I relate a lot to, St. Paul in Romans saying, I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now, if I do what I do not want, I agree that the law is good. So then it is no longer I that do it, but sin which dwells within me. For I know that nothing good dwells within me, that is, in my flesh. I can will what is right, but I cannot do it, for I do not do the good that I want, but the evil that I do not want. And so, lots of head knowledge, a lot of good intentions, a lot of desire to change, but coming back up against the fact that but still, me as a person, I'm attached to things and my will is weak. I guess I should open my outline at that point. Good to know where I'm going here. That set me off on, Deacon, you were talking about the virtues here, and that's what I really want to kind of run through a little bit, is that for me, understanding on the surface level what virtues are, what it means, what a virtue is, it seemed like that was the right direction to maybe that's something I need to understand better. What is virtue? Because, again, the moral life is not just us doing a good thing today, but it's like over the course of our life being transformed by God's grace into the sort of people who don't just do this good thing, but delight in doing these good things, that it becomes easier, it becomes the desire of our heart to do these good things. And that seemed to be something that was missing. Like, I need to understand that better. But personally, I found it very frustrating as I tried to look into virtues that, I read lots of books and articles, and it just seems like the virtues are often presented to us as this disordered array of different concepts. You think of the virtues, there's all kinds of things that get kind of shunted under that category: hospitality and honesty and sincerity and purity and chastity. There's a long list of things, and when you're looking for practically, I want to get moving on this, disordered, unhierarchical, long lists aren't really helpful. In fact, they're just kind of overwhelming. And that's what I encountered as I dug into it. Finally, a turning point for me was Joseph Pieper. his book, The Four Cardinal Virtues, which I highly recommend you look into. For me, he really opened up the conception of the virtues and vices that comes out of the Middle Ages from Aquinas and the Scholastics. And I found that they, unlike kind of the scattered, vague lists that we have, they had a real science of virtue and vice, and that's what I felt like I was missing. I discovered to my surprise in Pieper, and I'm just going to read these 3 points, that in the cardinal virtues in particular, they're an ordering principle to the science of virtue and vice. The cardinal virtues provide an easy and intuitive map and language for understanding human action and moral growth. So they're kind of a map of our faculties and how we work and how we interface with the moral life. The cardinal virtues also have a specific and profound order and hierarchy in themselves, and that they also provide order to so many other sub-virtues. And so the cardinal virtues, which are prudence and justice, fortitude and temperance, they not only have a specific, profound order within themselves that tells us about ourselves, but they actually give order and purpose and structure to the rest of the virtues that we hear about. They understand how they work and how they fit together. And thirdly, like so many treasures that come to us from antiquity through the stewardship of the Church of the Middle Ages, which are written off as stuffy, ethereal, impractical, idealistic, etc., on the contrary, the cardinal virtues are simple, intuitive, eminently actionable, and profoundly powerful as a tool for proactively cooperating with God's grace, working on and through us. So, again, many things that come out of the Middle Ages or from the Church, we assume that they're, again, stuffy and merely abstract. When we really dig into it, we realize that the ancients were so eminently practical. They, like us, wanted to be battle ready, and they wanted to get to the point. They wanted to figure out, how do we work and how do I grow in the moral life? So, Pieper and the cardinal virtues. One of the first big things that I discovered that set me on the right track and kind of overturned my whole conception of the virtues was that, for Pieper, drawing from Aquinas, that the first of the cardinal virtues, the mother and mold of the cardinal virtues, is prudence. And in fact, you can't do good, you can't be morally virtuous if you're not first prudent. And that was a weird thing to discover here, because the modern mind, when we think of many of the virtues, we tend to think of them only in the negative. So we think of purity. Purity just means don't do impure things to the modern mind. Chastity just means don't be unchaste. To the modern mind, prudence just means don't do stupid things. It's merely the negative prescription. But also, the way that we think of some of the cardinal virtues almost puts them at odds with one another. So the courageous man seems to be the person who's no longer being prudent. The prudent man he's playing cautious. The courageous man has left that behind and is now courageous. Or we might look at the temperate person and ask, well, is that person really temperate and reserved and disciplined, or are they just spineless? And that's and so this idea that prudence comes first in the moral virtues is weird, because again, we think of prudence as kind of the sissy virtue. It's just like not doing stupid things, But it's a profoundly important point that the moral life begins with prudence, and it's reflective of Aquinas and the Scholastics, their conception of the human person. We are a rational animal. We are in the image of God. We have reason and will, and so the first step in the moral life is the activation of that faculty. So the virtue of prudence, my way of putting it is that the virtue of prudence, as something we practice, is the virtue of going through a life intentional and awake. And it's a virtue, so it's not just we do it once, but that we have to practice this virtue of going through life awake to reality and trying to make choices accordingly. There's 2 ways to fail in being prudent, 2 general ways. One is to recognize the good and to refuse to do it. But I think the other way, that's more general and probably more indicative of the world today in some ways, is to simply going through life, for all intents and purposes, asleep, ignoring reality, not making a decision, reacting rather than acting. And so, to cultivate that virtue, of course, there's many ways we would, to be battle ready. We ask, how do I become the kind of person that is intentionally making choices? In Proverbs, it says that the prudent man looks ahead. He makes a plan. He surveys reality, and he makes choices accordingly. So the virtue of prudence is the first step in the moral life. It attends to reality, and one of the aspects of reality it most appropriately attends to is justice. And that's, of course, the second cardinal virtue. And justice is, we as persons, we live in an interdependent web of relationships with other persons. We've been created by God. We're in relationship with our spouses and our family members and our extended family and our communities and our employers and the people around us. And as persons in this web of interconnection, we have duties and obligations to other people as persons. And that's what justice is, that map of those interconnections. And acting in accordance to those interconnections is the virtue of justice. So the first thing that prudence attends to is, what are my duties and obligations? And justice means to face up to those duties, to organize and order them, and then again, proceeding from prudence, to make and carry out a plan for them. And it's a significant virtue because, again, we start by recognizing our duties and doing them well, but again, the point of the virtues is that we're growing into different kinds of people, not just people who reluctantly do our duty, but people for whom our duty becomes our delight. We want to become people who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And that's the promise in Scripture, that we grow it. We don't just, it's a spirit of sonship we put on. We put on the new man, and in Christ, we recognize our duty and we do it, but we also become the sort of people who delight in that. And that's, again, the point of the virtues is that as we grow in them, our will and our desires come more into line. Our heart matches, where our mind is directing us to. But it starts with prudence. It starts with the intentional choice to look at reality and to make a choice, and then to attend to my duties in justice. So then, the other two cardinal virtues, temperance and fortitude, one way to think of them, if we have prudence on top and then justice as the main thing that prudence attends to, and in the realm of justice, that's where we look at the objective demands of the moral law, 10 Commandments, all that kind of stuff. It kind of fits in there. That's where we recognize that, we organize it, we figure out how it's going to fit in our life. But then temperance and fortitude, they're two virtues that respond to the two general types of situations that threaten to carry us off from the simple, faithful demands of justice. So fortitude is the virtue that is active when we encounter fear, when we encounter some danger, some fear, some intimidation. Anytime I'm afraid to do what is right because it's hard, but I do what is right even though it's hard because it's right, that's this virtue of courage and fortitude. And then on the other side, whenever it's my own desires, desires for good things that want to pull me away from simply doing what I ought to do, that's what temperance is. Temperance is the ordering principle for my passions. So I have passions for good things. I desire food, I desire drink, I desire sex, I desire justice and peace and quiet in my home right now. But temperance is that ordering principle wherein I practice bringing those desires in order with justice, because oftentimes my desires are disordered. Temperance and fortitude are really helpful in an examination of conscience, because I look at those situations in my life where I feel myself no longer acting out of what I've prudently chosen in accord with justice, but when it's fear that's driving me. That's always a helpful situation. Whenever I notice that about myself, it's good to analyze that and say, I'm no longer acting because it's right and it's good and I've chosen it. I'm acting out of fear. Or maybe I'm not acting because I'm fearful of something. And suddenly I've discovered perhaps the next most right step that I'm supposed to take, because it's that thing that I've been avoiding. On the other hand, whenever I notice myself, even if I'm doing good things, apparently on the outside, good and laudable things that people are praising me for, but inside I notice about myself, I'm doing this not because I've prudently chosen this in accord with justice, but I'm doing this because I'm driven by some desire. Maybe because I just love doing this thing. I love the adulation I get. Maybe I love defending the truth and giving those people what for and showing them where they get off. And that's necessary and that's good. But if I notice in myself, I'm being driven by moved around by my desires and not my reasoned, prudent choices in accord with justice, then I suddenly have fruit for my examination of conscience. I need to temper that because I need to remain in reason. So my goal here was to get to the point as quickly as possible because I want to discuss it. But I think with this theme of being battle ready, I've found that re-examining the cardinal virtues and understanding them better gave me a framework for understanding what it means to be battle ready. Because I can do a good thing today, but I want to understand how my faculties work together, my will and my intellect, my passions. How in my choices do I become more the sort of person, by God's grace, always by God's grace, become the sort of person who can do those things better and more? How can I become battle ready? And it gives us, I feel like the cardinal virtues give us a great language and a set of concepts to understand our human nature better, but also then to analyze ourselves as individuals and ask, where do I really fall short? When I have these sticky areas in my life, what's actually going on there, and how do I break that into its parts and work on it? And so, one of the things that we do to grow in the virtues is we pick a plan of life. Again, the prudent man looks ahead. So we look at our lives, we look at reality, we face it straight on, and that's prudence. And we take on a plan of life, a rule of life that's going to help us. And so, Pentecost 365, the 7 commitments, is a real good example of that. And if we look at those, we can recognize how, that's choosing that plan of life is an act of prudence, and that's good. But in those components, we also see how by embracing those intentionally, we're also growing the other cardinal virtues. And so just a few examples from that list that speak to me personally. One is, I think I joked about it earlier because it was a real example. There are many areas in my life where I have no problem being courageous. I imagine myself a very courageous person. When it comes to praying with my wife, I am a complete wuss, And so I can imagine myself very courageous, but if I attend to the demands of justice, I recognize that praying with my spouse is way up there. Again, justice is a hierarchical part of it is organizing the demands that are placed on you, recognizing that serving God, worshiping God is first, but my spouse that He's given me comes very close after that. And if I'm not praying with her, that's high up there on my priority list. And so if I'm failing out of a lack of courage in that, then that's something I have to attend to. And so that's an example of one of the commitments of Pentecost 365 that speaks well to me. The examine, I think, is another good example too of how do we grow in prudence? How do I grow in being the kind of person who stays awake and alert with my loins girded from day to day? Well, part of it is always turning at the end of the day and facing in all of its ugliness what actually happened this day. Not letting a night go by where I forget all the little ways that I fell short. Staring at that, making a plan, again in prudence, for how it's going to be different the next day. And the more that we do that, the more that we grow in that, not just the prudence to be awake to that and to choose, but then also, as we experience the different situations, to grow in courage and temperance.
Who dares intrude into our presence without our leave? It is decreed he dies for this audacious deed. Ah, Esther there, the law condemns, but love will spare. My spirit sink, alas, I faint. Deep hours, what paleness spreads her beauteous face. Esther, awake, thou fairest of thy race. Esther, awake and live, 'tis my command. Behold the golden scepter in my hand, sure sign of grace. The bloody stern decree was never meant, my queen, to strike at thee.
Again, the prudent man looks ahead, makes a plan. To not plan or to fail to plan is to plan to fail. All that. Another thing that if you dig into prudence and how the scholastics sort of pieced it apart and looked at its parts, the different aspects of it. One of the things they identified is there are some additional, more nuanced ways to fail in prudence, and one is to recognize the good, but to kind of to just dilly-dally around, to kind of to not leap into it. And I think one of the things that we can encounter, I know, is a problem with me with something like a plan of life is I want to have the perfect plan. I want to have the end all be. I want to understand it all first before I'm all in for something. And part of prudence is also recognizing that I can't be instantly perfect. I can't see all. I can see the steps in front of me, So I need to make the plan with the best information I have now, and then go with it. And then again, the point of an examen and the point of confession, perhaps the point of God making a day-night cycle, and a month and a week and a year cycle, is that we constantly look back and say, okay, how did that plan run? I ran it, here's where it fell flat, here's where it worked, here's where it didn't work, here's where I'm going to tweak it for the next cycle, and then we run it again. And so I know that for me, one of the pitfalls is always, I want to have a perfect plan, from a perfect parenting plan, perfect marriage plan. I want to figure it all out first, but I got to get out there and keep living it, so you have to make the best plan you can today, run it, and then tweak it.
Persecution shall lay by her iron rod. Esther is queen, and Esther serves the living God.
I think we've never lived in a time when there were more barriers to being prudent, because it is so completely easy to go through life asleep. We can distract ourselves with drugs or alcohol or our devices. We can always not be present to the reality of our situation. And I think, again, one of the first failures of prudence is simply not to just go through life and not ever make a choice, not ever, become intentional, and really face up to the demands of reality. So it's more easy in this day than ever before, I think, to just go through life without really activating our prudence. So in one sense, you can talk about the cardinal virtues as human virtues, because on the human level, like even the Greeks kind of recognize that, you have these faculties, and these cardinal virtues seem to make sense as what it looks like when your faculties are flourishing and working together well. But then as Christians, when we look at that, and we look at that in the context of the theological virtues, we look at it in the context of knowing that any good we do comes from God, and without God we can do no good. We take that in mind, then we recognize that prudence has a whole lot more to it than merely our reason. When prudence attends, when we sit up and we attend to reality, we're attending to the reality of who I am and where I am and what's going on around me, and the demands of justice and all that. But part of what the Christian man is attending to is, and what's God speaking into my life right now? And my wife and I talked about this a lot, that we regularly ask ourselves now, when we're in a conundrum, like what's the prudent thing to do here? And what that means to us is that we often find ourselves in situations where we're trying to reason our way out of a box. I'm trying to please this person, and I got to do that, and I got to do this, and I have to mesh them all together, and I have to make a plan that makes it all work together. But until I really step back and ask God, what is the prudent thing here? What ought I to do? And oftentimes it becomes very clear when I attend to God's presence. And so I feel like it's almost the perfection of the cardinal virtue of prudence to introduce awareness of the presence of God, His providence, and that He speaks to us through our circumstances, through reason, through reality. But it's also always kind of having a liminal space, a moment of pause of, and what's God speaking into this moment? Because sometimes if I'm relying too much on my own reason, I may be not hearing that big, obvious neon sign that God's speaking to me. As Catholics, the moral life is not merely the objective demands of justice. Actually, there's a great quote I didn't read, I was going to read, but it's also our subjective choosing of that. So a mortal sin has to be not just objectively grave, but I have to actively choose it, and I have to understand that it's more grave. So it's in interaction between both the objective matter as well as what's actually going on inside. And the cardinal virtues give us the framework for analyzing that in ourselves. We can't really ever analyze it in someone else because we don't live in their head or their heart. But in myself, I can recognize, well, yeah, I have these external objective things, but what's really going on in my heart? Just as what can be a virtue in one person can be a vice in someone else, vice versa.
How can I stay when love invites? How can I stay when love invites? How can I stay when love invites? When love invites? I come, my queen. I come, my queen. I come, my queen, to chase delights. How can I stay when love invites? I come, my queen. I come, my queen. I come, my queen. I come, my queen. I come, my queen, to chase delights. With joy, with pleasure, I obey. To thee I give the day, to thee I give the day, to thee I give the day. With joy, with pleasure, I obey. To thee I give the day, to thee I give the day. How can I stay when love invites? How can I stay when love invites? How can I stay when love invites? When love invites? I come, my queen. I come, my queen. I come, my queen, to chase delights. How can I stay when love invites? I come, my queen. I come, my queen. I come, my queen. I come, my queen. I come, my queen, to chase delights. With inward joy his visage glows. He to the queen's apartment goes. He has his fury charmed, and all his wrath disarmed.
I think this is one of the reasons why prudence, especially prudence with an ear always open to the Holy Spirit, is so important, because you often find yourself in that situation where you can't see 5 steps ahead, but you can see 1 or 2 steps ahead. And part of that trust is that, by being faithful to this one step, I'll be opened to more. The saints didn't set out. They may have set out to be holy, but they didn't set out to be who they became. They didn't set out to do great things. They were faithful in the little things. And each time they were faithful in a little thing, God opens them up a little bit more and shows them more of the path ahead. And so I think with that in mind, it helps us to recognize that sometimes we look at our lives like, I want to be doing big, important things, not these less important, small things, but there's not really any difference in God's perspective. It's simply what's God's will and what's not. I was thinking about this a while ago. What does it really mean to have an omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent God? It means that in some sense, I can't ever actually I can't mess up his will. His will may be done in spite of me and without my cooperation, but I'm either cooperating with his will, I'm being a part in his story, or it's happening in spite of me. And I can look at my life often as if I have like a million options in front of me. But in reality, there's only two. Either I'm consciously trying to do God's will as best as I know it, or for whatever reason I'm not, whether through fear or desire or just refusal or pride or obstinance. There's a million, but it all amounts to I'm just not with my whole heart trying to do God's will. But if I am, I think you could make the case that if you really are trying to with your whole heart, then you are. Because God's already seen that next step from all eternity. He's already seen where you are, and he's giving you the grace to take that next step. And the next step may be a course correction. It may be, oh, okay, now suddenly I realize, I've been dumb up to this point, and I have to do something different. But, at any given moment, that question is simply, am I with my whole heart trying prudently to take that next step? And then again, trusting that what it means to serve an all-knowing and all-powerful and all-good God is that he's already there in that next step waiting for me. Cardinal, which means hinge, is on our human level, is the hinges of which the moral life hangs onto. So insofar as we play any role in our sanctification, the cardinal virtues are involved. Now, 2% of the work is ours, maybe to cooperate with God. 98% is all God's grace. And that's the theological virtues. To the degree that we have charity, that's a grace of God. That's a gift that he gives us. He gives us charity. Now, we have to accept that. We have to activate that. We have to act on that grace. And that's, again, I think where the cardinal virtues come in. That's what it looks like. The cardinal virtues are this map of what it looks like when the human person is striving and acting, and what we're acting upon is God's grace. But insofar as we're looking at the human aspect of that, the first step that I take as a rational being is looking around, attending to what the truth is, and making a choice. And so again, what I attend to is, God is God, and I am not. I'm a creature. I have these people around me, and I attend to the truth that, again, as it says in Scripture, loving the Lord with my heart, mind, soul, and strength, and my neighbor as myself. That is the great commandment, and that's the first demand of justice is this charity. That charity is something that I receive from God. So the main distinction is between, when we look at the cardinal virtues, we're looking at the human element of my action. How my intellect and my will and my passions are working together for me to accept this grace and to act upon it. But charity, properly speaking, is this gift of God, this grace. So we pray for it, we receive it, we actualize it, we carry it out.
sein. O gracious King, my people spare, for in their lives you strike at mine. Reverse it, I decree, the blow is aimed at Mordecai and me. And is the fate of Mordecai decreed, who when the ruffian Saul sought to destroy my royal lord, brought forth to light the desperate deed? Yes, yes, I own to him alone, I owe my life and throne. Say then, my queen, who dares pursue the life to which reward is due? 'Tis Haman's hate that signed his fate. I swear by yon great globe of light which rules the day, that Haman's sight shall never more behold the golden ray.
The interface between the theological and the cardinal virtues is a really interesting one for me, because again, I think on the one hand we can recognize that, so like the Greeks recognized the cardinal virtues, so they looked at their human nature and they recognized that what it would look like for those virtues to be full flowering would be the cardinal virtues. But our nature, of course, comes from God. You know, there's different ways that God's grace reaches us. We have the grace where He's in the moment, He's giving us the grace to be empowered to listen to the Spirit and to act, you know, in a powerful way. But we also have the sort of the embedded grace of He designed us. We didn't come from someplace other than God. He designed our faculties. He designed the virtues. He designed, you know, our whole being is oriented upward towards Him. And so again, we live as Christians. We live first and foremost. We rely on God, and we recognize that His grace comes first. My ability to act at all comes from Him. To cooperate with Him comes from Him. But then to the degree that He waits on and relies on and works through my cooperation, part of my role is as a human person, you know, a mind, a body, a soul, the whole package, the whole integrated person, to the degree that I am battle ready, to the degree that I make myself available to the theological virtues. That's the cardinal virtues are. That's me as a human, doing everything I can as a human person. Again, cooperating with God's design for me. You know, I need to be as prudent as possible. I need to be awake and alert and intentional, and I need to practice that every day. My life needs to be one of, you know, my life needs to be the examined life, the chosen life. You know, when I look at the demands of justice, I don't want to go through my life reluctantly doing the things I need to do. I want to turn and face those. I want to lean into those. I want to grow in not just a person who reluctantly does his duty, but I want to hunger and thirst for justice in my life. And to the degree I do that, and I encounter fear, and I choose to lean into it and to do my duty anyway, I grow encouraged. And when I recognize that my desires, for whatever they are pulling me away, and I temper those desires, okay, that's the full flowering of myself as a human. But then we see all the ways that those flower into the theological virtues. Justice flowers into not just giving people their due, but a full mercy and a love that God has. You know, that my temperance, again, I think temperance and the sub-virtues of temperance, so purity and chastity and sobriety and all those kind of things, are really interesting because we do tend to just look at the negative side. You know, just don't do the impure thing, or just don't get drunk, or just don't do whatever. But the whole point of tempering those desires is that my heart needs to be available to God. If my heart is attached to things, it can't be attached to God. If it's attached inordinately to my wife or to my job or to other good things in my life, there's no room for God. So it's not just tempering them for the hell of it. It's tempering them because I'm making a space for those theological virtues to take root, for the love of God to take root. one of the things that the cardinal virtues help us to do is to recognize and harmonize ourselves as not merely spirits trapped in bodies, but human beings. It's not an accident we're in bodies. God made us this way. We have to act as whole persons, and it's easy to kind of have a little bit of a latent dualism, and to kind of over spiritualize everything, and to have our faith as a compartmentalized part of our life. Where morality comes in once in a while when there's big moral questions, but generally it's just like in a small compartment of my life. Cardinal virtues help us recognize that no, anytime we do anything, we can ask, am I being prudent? And if I'm being imprudent in all these other areas of my life, then I turn over into my spiritual life, and then I find I'm not very good at being prudent or just or courageous or temperate. It's all one life. There's no compartments. If I'm undisciplined in all these areas, and then I'm like, well, why I have no discipline when it comes to this thing over here? It's all one thing. If I'm constantly imprudent and intemperate with my finances, I'm always spending all kinds of stuff. I just spend. I'm totally, at the whim of my passions when it comes to this area. And then I turn it over this other area, and I'm wondering why I just can't control myself. It's all one life. You only have your faculties. You only have your will, your passions, your abilities. And so it helps us recognize that every aspect of our life needs to come under the lordship of Christ, and every aspect of our life is an opportunity to grow in virtue. Every part of our life in prudence needs to be worked into our plan of how we're serving God and how we're completing the mission He's given to us. It needs to be worked into the hierarchy of the demands of justice that God has in my life. It needs to be ordered into how I'm going to work that out. And then every thing I do in my life, I can ask myself, am I doing this because I've reasonably chosen this as part of that plan, or am I doing this just because I'm afraid of something? Well, I'm still giving into fear, even if it seems like an insignificant thing. I'm still failing. I'm still growing in that vice rather than that virtue. Or if in another area, if I'm letting myself being driven by desire, even if it's a desire for apparently good things on the outside, but those aren't the good things that I discerned were what I was supposed to do, then I'm failing in temperance. I'm growing in the vices of not having ordered those passions. So again, our life is of a whole piece. There's no parts of it that are compartmentalized. And the cardinal virtues help us to recognize that, so that, again, sainthood starts when I treat every little thing like it's a big thing. Every little decision is the opportunity to be faithful to God.
You've been listening to Ignite Radio Live and just heard a presentation by JonMarc Grodi, delivered at a monthly battle-ready event for men united with their wives, woven together with select pieces from Handel's oratorio, Esther. If you want to be more fully ignited in everyday faith, go to Pentecost365.us. God bless you.
Anticetus hasty pile the tent, to build a tent.